and do we'll call the meeting to order, do a roll call vote, or roll call rather, and remember that everybody has to specify where they are at geographically, what municipality they're in. Heather, could you take us through that?
Sure. Stephen is not here. Jennifer?
Jennifer Cornell present, and I am participating from Central Lake, Michigan.
Oh my gosh.
Nice.
About 8 miles away.
Alan?
I am here in Ann Arbor.
Sarah?
Here in Ann Arbor.
Jeffrey?
Jeff Henney, I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Camilla?
Here from San Carlos, California.
Rita?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Alice?
Here from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Frank?
Here from Eastport, Michigan.
Adam?
Adam here in Ann Arbor.
And then Tom is not here, and Erica.
Here in Ann Arbor.
All right. So we have an agenda that everyone received a copy of and was put out on
recording in progress.
Sorry. It is being recorded already by CTN, but I also like to do a Zoom recording as a backup.
Perfect. And so we have an agenda that is put out. Is there any amendments to the agenda? Alan, you had your hand up.
Yes, I want us to consider an amendment to the bylaws to allow 3-minute public comment at the beginning and end. 2 minutes is too short, and this was not able to be discussed when we initially passed the bylaws. And so I would like us to be able to reconsider the bylaws to extend the time to 3 minutes.
So Alan, do you want to make an amendment to the agenda to have us reconsider the bylaws tonight, or are you looking to
I would like to reconsider the bylaws tonight so that we could have in our subsequent meetings a 3-minute time. And if we could do it tonight, there could be 3 minutes at the end of the meeting also. I would hope
Heather, what is the status of the bylaws in terms of their acceptance by?
They are going to City Council at the next meeting, so they haven't been in front of City Council yet. And I'm not sure how that would work. It might be as simple as me contacting the attorney if you do decide to amend the bylaws. It might be as simple as me contacting the attorney. He makes the change and then it still goes in front of City Council at the next meeting. Or it might be some big thing that we have to go through. I'm not sure, but my hope is that it would just be simple if you do decide to go that route.
Okay. Alan, do you want to make a motion on your amendment?
Yes, I move that we extend the bylaw, that we request in whatever way it can officially be done, the 2 minutes, that the bylaws on public comment be changed from 2 minutes to 3 minutes.
And you want to add that to tonight's agenda?
I so move if this is the time to move it.
Okay, can we get a second? Okay, all right. All in favor of adding Alan's amendment to the agenda? Raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, all right. And then could we get any other amendments to the agenda? Okay. Could we get a motion to move the amended agenda?
Motion.
Second. All right, second by Frank. All in favor of moving the amended agenda?
Favor.
Aye.
Right. Any opposed? Okay. All right, so Alan, we'll find a spot on here that we can discuss the amendment that you want. I think we'll have to actually vote on amending the bylaws here.
Thank you.
Yep. So next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from last time.
Yes.
Any questions on the minutes? Rita?
To say that I looked for the minutes yesterday and did not find them, and so I've only just skimmed them. So it's a little concern that I have.
Yeah, and it's a rightful concern because it was in fact not showing up as attached. It appeared to be attached, but it wasn't actually linked. So Alan pointed that out to me today. So it is fixed now. And I apologize for that because people did not have a lot of time to look over the amendment.
Is it possible that we could approve the minutes next time for 2 meetings ago, just to ensure? Is that a formality that we could just get through? That way we don't dwell on it.
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's probably okay.
Works for me.
I think that works. Yeah.
Okay. Any objections to that? Okay. All right. We'll keep going then. I think we're on to public comment. I know we have at least one person with their hand raised. Are there others with their hand raised, Heather?
No, just Eric. Oh no, we've got 2 hands raised. So I'm going to allow Eric to talk. So Eric, you should be able to talk, and I will time you for 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks for letting me speak. I'll talk extra fast since 3 whole minutes is too much. Really? 2 minutes? Council allows 3 minutes. Are we afraid of an overload of community input? So thanks for discussing that, and thanks to Alan for putting it on the agenda. Next, Councilor Briggs, kudos to you for actually starting the ball rolling as far as actual funding for this project that the voters voted to put forward, and somehow it was zeroed out in the budget before. Come on. I appreciate that. That was thank you for doing that and facilitating that. I think there's some problems with the wording, but it's a good start, a good step. Finally, something. And I hope, this is my final statement, and I hope that something will actually happen soon on that parking lot, that it will now become a public space and not a parking lot. Isn't it time now? The council is getting its great high rise, which no one objects to, on the Y lot. That's the perfect place. It doesn't shade anything. It's not public. Well, it is publicly owned, but that's the spot. That's great. Build a big building there. Connect it to the parking structure. But start doing something, please, on the library lot. How many more committees do we need? So thank you for the input. I appreciate it. I'm a person, I'm getting old. I'm getting impatient about these things. So I apologize if I was harsh. But so that's your charge. Get something done, please. Thanks a lot. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave early. I've got another engagement. But again, thank you for letting me speak.
Thanks, Eric.
All right. And then Robert Black, you're up next. You should be able to talk.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you for this opportunity to speak before you again tonight. Concerning Agenda Item 8, July 7th near-term activation discussion, I support you in preparing well in advance of that meeting and that you set clear outcomes for that important first working session. The questions you will raise in tonight's meeting, along with questions I shared previously with Chair Zemke, Vice Chair Ralph, and Ms. Seifert, could be answered and distributed to council members prior to the working session. Reviewing this background information in advance allows more effective use of the limited time of the working session and will lead to productive discussions toward your desirable outcomes. Concerning Agenda Item 9, subcommittees, I invite you to explore the recommendations from the task force report, but also review the subcommittees, garden, outreach, etc., already created by the talented professionals of the initiating committee over the past 16 months. Their work can be merged effectively into the Council of the Commons. Creating a strong subcommittee structure now will guide progress toward your near-term objectives. And I want to reiterate lastly a third issue concerning process that I have raised at prior meetings. We are still in the groundwork phase in creating an ultimate vision for this important project. We are not yet at design phase. However, visions of potential future scenarios that can stimulate our collective imaginings at this point are still valuable. Norm Tyler's sketches in the task force report, other professional visions from prior work on this site, and recently, another possible vision eloquently rendered by Mr. Trendoff a nationally recognized expert of future visions. All these imaginings are important to inspire us about what could be. We can honor these visions now for what they are, catalysts to an incredible future for Ann Arbor. They help us imagine specific physical elements of the commons and establish a meaningful basis from which to engage critical partners of the commons block
30 seconds.
and to prepare RFPs seeking professional guidance in the next phases of the work. Have a productive meeting tonight, and thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Black.
And then Odile has a hand up. So Odile, you're coming up next.
You're muted. There you go.
Hello, hello all. It's nice to see you assembled again. I wish you for a good meeting. I sent to every one of you the slideshow that 3 of us from the initiating committee made for the Earth Day of Ann Arbor. It was presented then during that Earth Day, and I hope you can look at it. And we have also spent about 250 hours in making a garden next in the middle of the lot on the left of the elevator and also on the side. Anyway, I hope you will go there and look at the beautiful flower and at the 75 sunflowers that are growing up. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? All right. So the next item is member news and updates. Why don't we open it up to any members who would like to say anything, and then maybe if we could, at that point, before we get into roles, we could add in Alan's amendment to the agenda and have quick discussion then, if that's amenable to folks. But any member news or updates? Frank?
Yeah, I would just like to echo some of the comments that were made by people calling in. I'm feeling an increased sense of optimism and momentum for this project. And again, thanks to Erica for stepping forward in such an important way. As I talk to others in the community, they're pleasantly surprised that the city has stepped forward and that this is hopefully the beginning of a strong partnership between the community and the city government. I'm trying to read my notes here. We're continuing to make some progress. Our private fundraising total is up to $47,000. We've gotten a new $5,000 pledge. Again, this individual, I think, was motivated by the city making its commitment, initial commitment to this project. And I want to thank Robert Black. He was in town, met with a number of us for his enthusiasm and lending his expertise to this. I don't know Stefan Trendoff very well at all, but I want to thank him. Again, it's sparking and stimulating our collective imagination. In no way is Stefan or any of us saying that this is somehow the path forward, his conceptions and his drawings, but it does stimulate interest and conversation and focus the community's attention on this important project. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Alice, I think you had your hand up too. Oh, you're muted, Alice.
Just briefly, I saw, I think it was on MLive, I'm not sure. I think it was written by Ryan Stanton, sort of a profile or a feature piece or whatever you want to call it about Stephen Trendoff or Stefan Trendoff and his drawings. I think reading it and being on this commission, this council, when I read it, I thought, well, is he speaking for the council? Is he speaking for the public through the council? Who is he speaking to, and what do we do? What do these persons do? It seems like there's a conflict, a public conflict of the source and purpose of the information. I don't know, like if one of us were to present something unrelated to the Council on the Commons, I think we would be up for criticism or something. I don't know. Because something was slightly odd or disconcerting about that article, just in that it didn't really mention the Council on the Commons much, and it was all about Stefan and those drawings to me, which, I have a pretty good eye for these drawings, were a little bit confusing. So that's all I wanted to say. I think it's important to recognize that we have to be clear about our own messaging and not let it be overtaken by one or another's interest that may not coincide with ours.
Definitely. Thanks, Alice. Any other comments? Okay. Then in that case, moving along, if it's okay with folks, we can.
If there's no one else commenting, I certainly want to comment on behalf of the initiating committee in general, and to respond a little to Alice's perception of Stefan's drawings, which represent, first of all, the initiating committee. And I wish that in some way we would have a regular report of the ongoing activities of the initiating committee. But we have formalized our nonprofit status as a Michigan corporation and established a bank account and become formal. And we formalized our 501c3 relationship with the Library Green Conservancy. So we are now in a position to be a fundraising element for the actual implementation of the recommendations of the task force and activation of the space, however that might come forward. And the drawings that's new news. The drawings that Stefan produced, I encouraged him to do that, as I had when we met in 2009. And in 2010, he produced a set of imaginative perspective, even before the underground parking was completed. And one of those drawings was, as an image, was circulated as a possible, to give a visual sense of how this community commons could develop. It was circulated during the petition campaign, which became Proposal A and was eventually passed. So this is not a new entry, though he is an independent graphic designer. And I asked him, would he look at all the material that had been developed so far, the physical elements, the other elements, and see if he could make a collage of what he has heard to stimulate the community imagination, not to end the discussion, but to begin it, because a visual representation of what are the elements is a good beginning point for engaging community imagination in as many forms as it can. So I see this, and Stefan saw this, and I think he represented it in the article in the MLive as a beginning point for community imagination. And I am glad he did that. This is and we have, we have not really circulated this beyond the what was in the M Live, which you only could see if you were kind of a subscriber. It was a restricted to subscriber article. But I would like people to actually look at these and let your own imaginations be stimulated and see it more further pollinated, proliferated as a way of engaging the public to see. So what do we want to change? What new ideas are there? Let's begin to engage the imagination. So I'm very grateful to his work. It is not to preempt anything, but it is to give some visual impetus to the imagination. The work on the garden has been mentioned, and I think that's one of the things the initiating committee has undertaken. And I hope everybody will go by there and give a blessing to the flowers by the elevator, both to the east of the elevator and particularly to the north of the elevator. And anybody that wants to get their hands dirty then is welcome to help weed. There's a program set up for the summer that the garden group of the initiating committee has set up to take care of the weeding and the watering. We did work with the DDA to get the irrigation system functioning again, and the DDA has been cooperative in closing the lot to parking during the times that gardening is going on. So we also have experience that the city does survive with the lot closed to parking. So I guess that is enough of a beginning report from the initiating committee. There are more things that we could talk of, but it's an ongoing group with its various subcommittees and is a partner in this whole process. And that's why two people from the initiating committee are specifically designated as members of the Council of the Commons. And I had suggested, while this individual member time is adequate in some way to give representation of what's going on in the initiating committee, I think it would be desirable if, beyond what individuals are doing, that the initiating committee itself was given a time to report to the Council of the Commons. We are linked together in the 2000, the last October resolution, October 5 of last year, that established both the initiating committee as an on-the-ground working group and the Council of the Commons as an advisory group to the City Council. And in some way, from our work on the ground, we are advisory to the Council of the Commons, and we should all be seen as hand in glove together. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
For me and for the initiating committee.
Jeff?
Yeah, I just want to, as a member of the initiating committee and also, of course, the Council of the Commons and the Library Green Conservancy, I just want to reassure everybody on the Council of the Commons, from my perspective, that the initiating committee, participated in the creation of the Council of the Commons, and I personally see us very much as, I see very much the Council of the Commons as being an outgrowth of the initiating committee and created by the City Council. But the initiating committee really is, I would say, very much respectful of the Council of the Commons. And from my perspective, we want to be very integrated with your, or our, if I could put on my Council of the Commons hat, desire to be very inclusive about community input, not to preempt any outcomes or decisions about how this evolves, and to be collaborative and helpful by, feet on the ground and working to, staff and participate in in working groups, okay? And to not be perceived, hopefully, as adversarial or, you know, some kind of threat or some kind of preemption machine or something like that. None of that. From my perspective, I am completely respectful of the Council of the Commons and will go the extra mile to accommodate any concerns the council has. So, you know, I just wanted people to be clear about that. I also want to remind people that even though Alan was, you know, somehow connecting the initiating committee with Stefan Tremdorf's drawings, that was not a decision by the initiating committee that Stefan would do those drawings or to, you know, transmit those drawings in any particular direction. And as far as I know, the initiating committee did not have anything to do with that MLive article. And I was not aware of that MLive article in advance. So I just wanted everybody from my perspective to hear what I had to say about it. Thanks.
That's all completely true. This was me and Stefan were old friends, and he's been connected with this project from its beginning as an individual.
Camilla.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I'm going to be more vocal today during this meeting because, like many other meetings, it's already been dominated by initiating committee members, and I would love to hear other people's voices. So I just want to put that out there first and foremost. Yeah, I want to respond to Alan, Jeff, and also agree with what Alice has initially offered to the group. I agree that the MLive article could have had the impact of misinforming the public. We have not asked for any RFPs yet. And yet we already have members of the public creating illustrations and architectural renderings and then sending it out to the public. And that's confusing, even for me as part of the Council of the Commons. I also just want to urge the initiating committee members that while it's great to encourage community visioning, these drafts are not supported by the Council of the Commons members, the Council of the Commons at large as an entity, nor City Council. And we should be careful about the language that we use when we use words like we to encompass groups of people. I have very different desires than Alan, and sometimes words can get tangled up, and we're projecting our desires by conveying that they're the desires of the entire Council of the Commons. So that's been frustrating to me. I just also want to say that I'm trying to read between the lines, and I just really don't understand how initiating committee members can continue to preach about their efforts when your actions aren't going through a democratic process. The group is still very small to my knowledge, and it represents a very specific demographic. So I just want to call that out.
Thanks, Camilla. And I'd like to make sure that I have some thoughts on the article that was in MLive and things, but I think I'd like to bring those up during kind of roles, because we've had roles on the agenda for a couple of times now, and I think it's certainly based on everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks, high time that we talk about them. So unless there are any other points here, I would like to, Jeff?
Sorry, I just wanted to respond to Camilla. I totally sympathize with her perspective. I would, however, like to ask her if you have people that would like, or know people who would like to join the initiating committee. I and everybody else on that committee, as far as I know, would be delighted to receive them, have them join. We are totally open. You know, I mean, there's a lot of work involved here, and a lot of people aren't willing to make the effort to go out and do the gardening, or to spend time in meetings, or organize fundraising. You know, we're all doing this on our own time and making an effort. And I'm sorry that there's a certain demographic, and we would be delighted to have more people. So if you can bring other people in to us, we'd be happy to put them in prominent roles in the initiating committee. But you know, if somebody's got to get this done, and we've been doing stuff, and nobody else has been doing stuff, and we've been doing our homework, and nobody else is, or very few people have done their homework. So again, I'm totally sympathetic to your views, and I hope that you can bring people to us. We'd be happy to receive them. Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. I'd like us to be a little cautious that when we're amongst this group, my sense is that we are wearing the hat of a city commissioner, and we're representing, we're representatives of the city in this group. I know that's a little confusing. I've worn a lot of different hats in the community before, and so it's difficult, especially when members of this group are sitting here representing members, different organizations, and so it's important to bring those reports forward from other groups. But I would like us to be careful not to use this as an opportunity to maybe recruit for nonprofit organizations or different things like that. I just think we have to be real careful about thinking about what this platform is. So I just want us to caution kind of how we use this discussion time.
Thank you, Erica. Any other member comments? Alice?
Just briefly, I think one way that each group that may be a separate group from the council and the commons, but may want to report, we can accept written reports at any time, and those can be attached to any meeting agenda. And I think that would be a highly appropriate way, the same way that city council receives reports from other commissions. We can receive reports from other groups, and that would be highly useful. But to take our time, our limited time, at a meeting of this group I agree with Erica, we need to be cautious about the use of our time and the direction that our discussion goes. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Alice. Okay, in that case, we're going to move on, and per our amended agenda, Alan, you made a motion to have an amendment to the bylaws. I think we probably need to make sure we have the language figured out on this so that we can take a vote if it's so moved and amend the bylaws. Heather, what is the process for doing that in terms of our?
Make a motion tonight saying that you wanted to amend the bylaws, and then I will figure out how that actually works with our attorney. Like I said before, I think it could possibly just be a very simple change before it goes in front of city council. But if that's what you want to do, you would make a motion and approve that tonight, and then I'd figure out how that happens.
Okay. Alan, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, the motion would be to change the number 2 to the number 3 in the bylaw that refers to public comment time at the beginning and at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Second for that motion?
Second it.
All right. And all in favor of Alan's motion, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Alan, the motion carries.
Hey,
And it worked out.
I'm excited. Eric Lipson will be excited too.
All right.
Thank you.
Alice, you have your
Could
hand
I
up.
just insert a comment? I hope we don't have to limit our own speaking time to 3 minutes. If we could all individually keep ourselves to 3 minutes to start with, it might help us get through a meeting.
Alice, I'll yield the balance of my time to you. All right. Okay, so let's get into roles, because I think there was certainly some feelings that were brought up during the membership member updates speak to some of these roles. And certainly we have a couple of groups represented, a couple of external groups. I guess now we can officially say nonprofit groups that have representatives here. We've also talked about other a little more ad hoc groups, including members of a block ownership, building ownership committee or something. It's probably far beyond time that we identify. And I do think the article actually spurred a really important debate. Certainly understand there's some hard feelings. I can tell you I got a call asking why we did not hold a public meeting where the drawings were presented, insinuating that what the meeting that the drawings were presented at was a public meeting. And I corrected the individual and said that's not accurate. We haven't seen the drawings. In fact, I have not seen the drawings. And so I think to some of the points that maybe Camilla made, maybe Erica made, it is very important that we establish how we as a city commissioned advisory council take in information and communicate externally where we're representing, because I think there are a lot of folks that misinterpreted the meeting at which Mr. Trendoff presented the drawings to be a representation of this body, and obviously that's not the case. And and so it is very important that I think we establish what those roles are around the initiating committee, and the city has around the initiating committee, the Library Green Conservancy. Those are two nonprofits now, and other nonprofits, frankly. And I think we should probably have a standardized process for how we're going to do this, because that will ensure that we're fair and equal to all nonprofits in the community. So those are my thoughts on this. In terms of roles, how do we feel is best to take in information? How do we want, given that we do have a couple of representatives from a couple of nonprofits on the committee who are, according to the charter of this commission, there to bring that voice to the table? How do we want to make sure that we have a formal establishment of how we're going to receive information from external nonprofits and other community groups? And then how do we want to ensure that our roles of certainly the Library Green Conservancy and the initiating committee, as two external nonprofits who have representatives here, are part of this? So I'd like to start that discussion. Erica?
I really liked Alice's suggestion in terms of having written reports coming in. I think that's a good, efficient use of our time in terms of being able to read information ahead of time. And I like the member updates at the beginning of this meeting, but I do think it is utilizing a fair amount of our time, where we have pretty limited time each month to be able to kind of move forward the work of this commission. And so I'm not sure if that's the most productive use of our time, unless there's something of particular note that needs to be presented.
Very good. Sounds good. Other thoughts? Frank? Frank, you're muted. Sorry.
I second that. I think written reports in advance would be useful. It would inform our conversations and discussions, and would provide more time for the council to actually have interaction. So I think it's a good idea.
Rita?
Yes, I agree with that. And I also asked that we set a time frame by which information is prepared and presented to Heather to be included, so that we have it. It's really helpful that way.
Thank you, Rita. Seems like we've got a fair amount of support for your idea, Alice. Jeff?
Yeah, I agree with it as well.
Okay. Alan?
Yeah, well, for instance, So a piece of information came into the world with Stefan's drawings. Should that properly have been presented, sent to the Council of the Commons? The reason it was an article is because he has a relationship with Ryan Stanton. He walks his dog, they're old friends. So Ryan wanted to do an article on him. And this was an opportunity, and Ryan is interested in this and sort of covering it all. But should that material then come to the Council of the Commons so that we can evaluate it, or should it come to the facilitated meeting? How does it intersect with our official process?
So I'll just speak for myself in this regard. I think, if I'm not an artist and certainly nothing by comparison to Mr. Trendoff. But if I drew some sketches and I was a member of this council, I think it would probably behoove me to send them to the council, prior to a group, particular a nonprofit that had representation on the council, receiving a hearing about it. I think that would have been a heads up type of thing. And then it could get in the hands of everybody here, which means it would then be added to the communication, public communication. And I think to the point that Camilla made around the democratic process for this, having that be how we receive information, that it become part of the public debate is very important, at least to me. And I think also then, ensuring that there are always going to be groups of people who get together to do certain things. Obviously, the gardening is another great example where folks have gotten together and pictures have been shared. Your wife sent in pictures prior to this meeting, Alan, and I think that's wonderful. It's just nice if there is some transparency around those types of things, given that we're all on one body here. Obviously, if it were a group that didn't have any direct representation here, if they wanted to send us something, that would also be wonderful. But I feel like we're sort of at a heightened level of standard when it comes to this, because we're all here, and I think it's my goal for all of us to develop consensus around something, and that would help, in my opinion.
Should these pictures be put into a PowerPoint or something and sent to all of us on the Council of the Commons?
I think that would be fine. However they want to be communicated would be helpful. Obviously,
well, if you would send them, if you would send them to me, and then I can attach them to the next agenda, and then that way they can be visible to the public as well.
Good. Is that what people want?
I think that what we're hearing from several folks this evening is it's important that if there is, in particular for the two nonprofits that have representatives here, the Green Conservancy and the Initiating Committee, that type of thing is very important for members here who are not part of those organizations, to, if there's something dealing with the space that we're all talking about, that we know, so that it feels transparent to the public, but it also feels transparent to us. So that would be my opinion.
Well, I will facilitate that. That would seem desirable to me as well. And I apologize that that among the various yarmulkes I wear is on here on the Initiating Committee, and on my friendship with Stefan, and seeking to encourage him to continue his imaginative integration of the many things he has seen as a citizen living in Ann Arbor, observing the ongoingness of this whole thing. And then it'll be out there and people could do with it what they like. I hope that we can really see it as a stimulation to the imagination of what other images there are, maybe develop a competition of artists in the Taubman Center in the public schools, get more efforts to integrate the vision together. I will make arrangements as best I can to digitally send that to Heather, who can distribute it. And it could also be then publicly accessible rather than simply through the MLive article.
All right. Thank you, Alan. Erica?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that it's the representation on this commission is a little bit, the formation of it was a little bit confusing, I think, for and unique in terms of city commission formation, in terms of kind of representation, though there is some precedent in terms of, transportation commission. Different commissions often have representatives from different entities across the city, but because of the kind of heightened awareness around this particular site in our community, I think there's also a little confusion for folks who aren't very close to it, to not understanding the Council of the Commons is not even a typical commission way of naming a commission. So there's going to be a lot of confusion from folks that aren't very close to this, to understanding, okay, what's the Council of the Commons, what's the Initiating Committee, what's the Library and Conservancy. Actually has a more kind of nonprofit conventional name in some ways, in terms of defining that. But we just might all want to be really aware that confusion exists in the community, and be extra cognizant of trying to be careful of what hat we're wearing, and being clear about communicating that. And
yeah, I would just echo Councilmember Riggs' sentiments too. I think the representation out in the community, especially, I think it's totally okay and encouraged if folks have conversations, around this in public, and call other entities of the city or community members or organizations and ask questions. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We're all citizens and we have the right to do that. And certainly as a member of another organization, you have the right to do that. And so I think that's good. I think the key is that we do need to have a process here where if there's going to be a communication, a question from the council, we probably want that to go through Heather as a good point person for our council, and meaning so the external approach of an entity on behalf of the council should go through there. And then if anyone else here is engaging in that on behalf of a different organization, then they should just make that clear too. And I think that will clear up some of the issues that Erica brought up, and certainly some of the issues I've heard about at least, prior to this. So, Frank?
Yes, I'm finding this conversation very helpful because, I'm obviously on the board of the Library Green Conservancy. I'm on this board, and I'm very careful not to try to represent this board in any way in my comments. I feel I can speak as a member of the board. I can't speak for the board of the Conservancy either, but I think role definition and communication. This is a very helpful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Camilla?
Yeah, I'd just like to redirect our attention to role making. Yeah.
So in terms of formal sort of establishment of of roles, that it seems like to me we obviously have Heather. Why don't we start off by just making sure that we're clear as to what the city has charged us with as a commission, so that we can then utilize that in our work next week, and then we can also, I think we've talked significantly about the membership here. Why don't we get into that a little bit?
Sure. According to the resolution, and I'm just going to read you the language, and then we can dissect it if we need to. But the Council of the Commons is an advisory body to City Council and the City Administrator that will build upon the work of the Center of the City Task Force by providing written recommendations annually on such subjects as funding needs, an operations and maintenance model, and the role of the Council of the Commons.
Excellent. And I think this is important to remind ourselves for a couple things, a couple of reasons. One, Camilla, to your point around setting that expectation, what our expectations are, but then also to get our thinking in mind, we're going into a good, hopefully a really productive, progressive session next week, and understanding that one of the actions coming out of that should be recommendations to council around whatever the charge of the meeting is. And I think that's particularly important when we think about what taking action based on our role is. So is there any question or confusion around that role?
Well, I would like Heather to read also the other part of that October 5th, 2020 resolution that initially established the Council of the Commons, because that described the role of the initiating committee as the on-the-ground community partner in implementing the recommendations of the Center of the City Task Force and various other elements of that. And I hope, and I asked before, that everybody actually read that recommendation. The whereas is what the initiated committee was about, and the resolve to recognize it as a on-the-ground partner, part of the block committee, and interface to follow up on the public engagement of the Center of the City Task Force. But that also describes the role of the initiating committee, and the City Council expressed itself on that, which is how come we are here as designated representatives rather than simply as citizens who applied and were vetted and whatever the process was.
I missed part of what you said. You were cutting out a little bit there, but I think one of the issues is that there's been multiple interpretations of what that language is, and one of them had anticipated that the initiating committee would, your function was to get the Council of the Commons up and running, and then the Council of the Commons would be the primary group, and many people thought that the initiating committee would disband at that point. You have not, obviously. You have now incorporated into a 501c3 group, so that calls into question, I think, which I don't know. I'm not an attorney, and I don't want to pretend to officially interpret the language that's in there. But the role is just, how do you intersect then with the Council of the Commons, and you're recognized as an entity in that resolution as doers, but what does that really mean? And I think that's the question, and I think that's part of what you are all trying to define right now.
Well, it distinguishes us from the Council of the Commons, which is specifically defined as advisory to the City Council.
Right.
We are defined as, essentially, I don't remember the exact language, as on-the-ground doers. And that's what we've been trying to get together. And what the doings are in terms of the garden or design or Liberty Plaza or any of that is sort of what the process we all together try and get functioning, so that people are really maximally involved. And I think that sort of got described somewhat in the short-term, medium-term, long-term visions that most people put forward, and we're dealing with the short-term elements of that in our meeting on the 7th.
Right, and I think we've got a few hands up here. Alice unmuted herself, and then Erica did as well. I think, Alan, the part of the main point here around the description of the initiating committee is that on-the-ground doers seems to have had some scope creep into what the Council of the Commons is going to make recommendations on. And I think what our point or what some of the points that Heather brought up are related to ensuring that even if obviously the initiating committee can incorporate into a 501c3, there's nothing wrong with that, but making sure that we're not running two parallel paths here is probably very important, and certainly important from a public transparency perspective. So that's sort of what the debate is, I think. Alice?
Oh, Erica had her hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Erica?
Either or is fine with me. I just wanted to say from my perspective, obviously I was, when I came on to council, I think there was, I understood from the kind of city attorney's office that the initial resolution that sort of formed this commission, was a little unconventional in terms of defining roles and expectations. And so that was part of the goal of the second resolution, was to clarify some of that. It's still a little bit confusing because that October 5th resolution is out there. And so I think there may be an important role for this commission in terms of going back at some point and clarifying if there's something additional that is important that wasn't in that resolution that got passed by, in the resolution that Heather read off in terms of what our expectations are for this commission. If that's not enough is captured there, I think that's maybe important feedback to give to council. From my perspective, I find nonprofits to be an incredibly valuable part of the community. I run one, so I absolutely see their value in the community, but I think it's really important to keep these functions separate. Nonprofits serve in very important advocacy and fundraising and all great roles in the community, but city commissions serve a different purpose, advisory purpose to council, and so I want to make sure that we're not blending the role of a nonprofit with the role of the city commission. And to me, that first resolution did a little bit of that more than I was comfortable with as a council member. So I personally look to that second resolution for guidance. If I would look to members of this commission for more guidance on if that's not sufficient or if we need to clarify it.
We got a few folks, I think. Alice, and then Frank, you unmuted yourself. So assume you're
okay.
Yep.
I think Erica put it rather well, that there are different roles and different purposes. Also, Heather's reading of the purpose is from that second resolution, I believe. And it's important to remember that a succeeding resolution takes priority over the first one. And I think it does provide some clarity. We have it at the top of our agenda every meeting, and I think it's worth reading every time. And the way, I think, one way that we can provide some definition between the groups that are represented on this council and the council itself is that we have the opportunity to go to item number 9, subcommittees, and think about perhaps there is a subcommittee that the initiating committee members, representatives on this council, could call in other people to their small group of committee. I think it's 3 to 5 people in a committee are permitted, including members that are not representatives on this council. But I think that might be a way to sort out these rules. Every nonprofit that comes along could have this committee with one of our council people being part of that, and they would address as such things as a garden or as this or that, because these committees need to have a good focus for their work. And then that to me would make every committee have the option to become doers, to focus on an activity that moves us along in our mission to advise the council as to what is needed to accomplish the things we're recommending. Those are the two things I wanted to say, that our purpose is well defined and that we have within that purpose and that structure of the bylaws, we have an opportunity to express various groups' interests, whether they are the nonprofits or not, by having leadership from our council on the commons that includes other people to accomplish a certain goal, a certain action, and come up with a recommendation for council to implement that.
It's great idea, Alice. Frank?
Yes, I think I'm unmuted. I just want to basically support what Alice and Erica have said. My concern is that we're getting stuck on something. It's important. I think the initiating committee is an important resource. It provides a certain amount of energy and activity, but the city is looking to the Council of the Commons to move forward. And I'm excited about the facilitated working group. And I think that and the subcommittees, will give us focus and definition, because I think we have to move as a group into this next phase in an effective way. And I think we're ready for that, and I would encourage us to do that.
Thank you, Frank. So in terms of, we can bounce around a little bit on this agenda. And I think that the key area of importance around the rules is we do need to, since we have a couple of representatives from two external now nonprofits on the council here, I think it's important for all of us to be conscious of establishing how that relationship is going to work, and then how, through maybe a subcommittee structure or otherwise, the interaction happens. Obviously you all are a part of the council too, but certainly if there are things like visioning or activities or gardening or things like that, that could be integrated, as Alice said. And I think our goal for this agenda item maybe morphs into the subcommittee, if there's an interest in essentially linking things a little more directly in that process. What are folks' thoughts about doing that?
I'm not sure I understand what you're suggesting. Can you say that again?
Yeah. So I think what our desire to do on this is to essentially clarify for everybody here that the role of this council is described in that latter agenda, and we do want, and I think you're hearing this from a lot of folks, to establish a clear interaction for how the Library Green Conservancy and the initiating committee in particular are engaging in work around the lot, and how we can better integrate some of that hands-on work into the policy advisory role that this council has. And it was suggested by Alice that we do that through a subcommittee process. Does that help clarify, Alan? Alan, you're muted. Sorry.
Alan, you're muted.
Yeah, that I'm a little clear. I don't quite. We haven't really talked about what these subcommittees are. I'm not sure whether you're suggesting the initiating committee become a subcommittee. I saw more subcommittees be functional in terms of areas of development, like the library, like the Liberty Plaza, like playground, like children, like garden and stuff like that.
No, it's standing.
Yep. I think that I think that's been potentially a suggestion. Jeff has had his hands up. Sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to support what Alice said. And I think that points to, and what you said, Adam, and that points to the importance of our, putting in place some subcommittees so that we can, number one, start doing stuff, right? And number two, to Camilla's point, bring in a lot of different voices to participate in the roles and activities that are assigned to those subcommittees. And, there are some suggestions of what the initial 2 or 3 or 4 subcommittees should be. And I think we should act on that as quickly as possible so we can get a bit of momentum. But I think that's where you're going to get the real action. That's where you're going to get the diversity, and that's where you're going to get the solidarity developing between everybody. So I think it's important to get on with those, identifying 3 or 4 subcommittees and getting on with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Sarah.
Thanks. I don't want to belabor this too much. I'm still fairly confused as to, I understand what Heather said, like I understand the purpose of this Council of the Commons. I don't understand the initiating committee and the Library Green Conservancy and how those are different and how you guys work. Like, why are there now 2 501c3s that are both have the mission of improving this space? Maybe I need a flow chart or something, or we need to delineate exactly what the different roles are, but I'm just not getting it yet. And we don't necessarily have to discuss this here. Maybe this will come out more, but I'm just still incredibly confused as to how our work intersects with the work of 2 groups that now seem to be incredibly similar.
Can I add on to that? I think I leave these meetings often wondering who's the tail and who's the dog in terms of, the wagging situation. That was a terrible analogy. But it also, I feel like we were appointed to come up with recommendations for city council consideration, but this activity sort of just continues to happen and plans get made and then reported back to us. It feels a little backward to me, versus, in my mind, I understand that there was an initiating committee and there was, this original vision as to what things, what we would love for it to be, by the will of the people in the vote. But, what's feasible? What do the Block partners want? What is, what can we actually accomplish, versus just sort of this whole, we're gonna plant flowers, we're gonna have this garden, and let's move on to phase 2. So it feels a little frustrating to me just in terms of where the lines are in terms of roles and responsibilities. And if the desired outcome is for this committee to come to council with actionable recommendations, that feels a little bit disparate from activity that's already happening. So I agree with you, Sarah, and well, not to assume I understood your point, but from what I understood of your point, I think that's why we continue to have this circular conversation every meeting that we've had so far. So hopefully maybe at the end of this, we'll have some resolution around or clarity around that.
Sure. And I think that's part of the desire with this agenda item, right? We do have 2 nonprofits that have had designated representatives to this council. They are going to do work that is in their mission. And I think it's our desire here tonight to establish how that work is going to interact, so that we can take it into account as we make policy advice to council. I think that's basically the basis of this. Alan?
Yeah, well, the council has expressed itself in quite a bit of detail on what it wants to see. Get the cars off, get a block committee going, activate the public space, and that is what the initiating committee is seeking to pursue. There doesn't need to be any new recommendation.
I think Alan froze.
Mhm.
Alan, we're going to get back to you here when you pop back on. Frank, you got your hand up. Why don't we go to you, and then we'll come back to Alan when you're done.
I'm not going to try to give you detailed background here, but the Library Green Conservancy was formed as a 501c3 to advocate and participate in the reestablishment of our town square, which we now refer to as the center of the city on the library block. Our emphasis is on the physical space represented by the public land on this block, and to raise funds from the private sector to help make this happen. I hesitate to try to talk for the initiating committee. I think they have similar goals regarding the physical space, but also the commons and commoning, and that can take you, into other activities like banking and other social activities, social betterment activities. Because the initiating committee was not an organized entity recognized by either the state or the federal government as a nonprofit, the Conservancy was brought in to serve as a fiscal agent for any grants that the initiating committee might want to apply for, and we would be the 501c3 to facilitate that. From my perspective, I'm a member of the Council of the Commons. I happen to be representing the Library Green Conservancy, but I don't think of it that I'm coming with my Library Green agenda, other than to reestablish the town square and help build interest and financial support from the private sector, which would seem to be in complete sync with the Council of the Commons. So I see myself just as an active participating member of the council, and I happen to get this appointment through the Library Green Conservancy. But I don't view myself any differently than any of the other members. So I don't know if that helps clarify anything.
It definitely helps for me, Frank. Alice, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, it's just, I had a small little emergency here, which I have to get back to in a little while. So I may have missed an important point, but back to our purpose stated every meeting on our agenda to make recommendations to City Council, building upon the work of the Center of the City Task Force, which is now disbanded. It has, it produced a extensive report of community engagement and shared community goals and wishes, a wish list sort of. And I think that that gives further emphasis to this council, in that we are basically the descendant or the derivation from that task force. And it is our job to carry on for the task force to make recommendations that will make real the goals and aspirations of the city as they are expressed in the task force report. So in a way that sort of subordinates any existing group to this new avenue for action, which is this council's recommendations to City Council, and City Council actually has to act upon it if we're going to get anywhere. Anybody can volunteer for anything outside of this council and report back if they have helpful things to report back. But I think maybe we have lost focus on the fact that this council is a derivation from, is derived from the task force report, basically. And that does not attach to any specific group. It attaches to all the groups, basically. And that's where inspiration and aspiration can be focused in a specific goal from the task force report, maybe by a subcommittee. If they're, that's the way I look at it right now, is that all of the groups that want to support the center of the city are equal in their opportunities, and that the opportunities we can offer are focused opportunities. Every subcommittee should have a recommendation in mind, because I think that's where we will get the most unified recommendations to council. That helps us have solidity to a recommendation. Our goal as a group is to make the recommendations, because without those recommendations, nothing goes anywhere. And at least from my point of view. So I think that's where we're heading, and I hope we get there really soon.
Thanks, Alice. Alan, you cut out. Jeff
Yeah,
said,
I apologize for my battery failure. But
That's okay.
I have relocated, replugged in again. I moved to another place where it was more stable, but the battery wasn't as stable. So I'm back. Hello, everyone.
That's okay. Jeff, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Frank said. I was appointed here from the initiating committee. I also happen to be on the Library Green, but I view myself on here at the Council of the Commons as a member of the Council of the Commons, and I do not wear the hat of the initiating committee or the Library Green Conservancy, and I respect and support the primacy of the Council of the Commons. And I agree with Alice in her view of how this should be conducted. Thanks.
Thank you. Rita?
I just want to say I do appreciate this discussion of rules. At first, I was confused as to what we were talking about, what rules, and now it clearly makes more sense to me about the levels of confusion. And I think that what I can say on this is, as an add, because I agree with much of what's been said, is that what I think we're seeing from some of the groups, like the initiating committee in particular, is a level of impatience with moving to something that's tangible. And that is built on the fact that we're now, 2.5 years post referendum on the issue in which it was approved. And so there are many reasons for the delay, much of which is related to COVID-19. So I think we need to regroup in that way and maybe readjust and acknowledge the impatience. I think it's real and reasonable, but move forward. And I do hope that as we move into the subcommittees, that each of them has a defined scope, and that is communicated clearly to each of them or developed by each of the groups, so that we don't run into overlap among them as well, because we could easily come into like more confusion than we have right now, unless we have some clear scope on those. That's all.
Perfect. Thank you, Rita. Do we want to start talking about subcommittees? Because it seems like it seems like we've, correct me if I'm wrong at all, but it seems like we have clarified pretty thoroughly what our role is here, and many folks who are representing both the initiating committee and the Library and Conservancy have clarified how they feel they come to this. And I think we've clarified how information should be communicated internally and externally. Are there any other role clarifications that folks are feeling they're hazy on? I think from now on, it's about making sure we follow that process, so that I can't remember if it was Jennifer or you, Sarah, that said we don't get into a situation where the tail is wagging the dog and have a situation perpetuate. All right. So let's talk about subcommittees. What are folks?
I'd just like to put something out there about subcommittees, because I think there might be a perception that the subcommittees would be doers, activity people that are going out there and painting or, doing something else. But because, as I understand it, because they are, sub bodies of this larger body, which is an advisory group, the subcommittees would also be advisory and supporting the mission of the larger group, which is to then provide recommendations to city council. So I don't want people to get their hopes up that the subcommittees would be something like the group that's been going out and putting all the beautiful plantings out on the site. You would still be advisory.
Erica?
Yeah, that was what I wanted to say as well, partly, is I think I would caution us not to try to create too many subcommittees and recognize we're a relatively small group. Certainly the committee that I am the most interested in getting started and is utilizing that funding that council has allocated for the development of a physical plan. And I think our upcoming special session is going to help us develop some recommendations on some short-term recommendations as well. There may be a need as well for a committee that's focused on further developing what comes out of that working session, I can imagine. But I do think that there's a very special role that nonprofits play in our community, and I'm very appreciative of the work that volunteers have been doing to do plantings and to beautify the site that's there and to do things that government doesn't always have the time or the resources or the things move more slowly. So I appreciate that's happening. But I think we want to make sure that we're moving towards what the charter amendment voters asked of us and making recommendations to council.
For sure. Alice?
In that respect, I think, we could come up with a couple of examples right now of things that would be appropriate to a subcommittee study and activity to result in a recommendation that we vote on to send up to city council for the action that is needed there. So I'll just throw out a couple. And that would be to establish the priority of center of the city activities over parking cars on the top of the structure. Maybe say it that way then, rather than to say to get the cars off the top of the structure. It might allow, for instance, how do we, we recommend that city council, well, we got to be specific, I guess, but that's what the subcommittee would decide, what we recommend in order to get, for instance, Adam's suggestion of regular use of food carts for an activity on the site. So there are two things. One, to establish the priority of center of the city activities over parking on the surface. We used to be against surface parking lots. Why are we now trying to keep this one? I don't quite understand, but those are two. And then the corollary to that would be making it possible to have food carts on a regular basis and try to make this a regular, to recommend a monthly or a 2 weekly, every other week, or maybe every week on a weekend like farmers market. Just because farmers market can't always do food trucks, it makes sense to have a place where food trucks can be, and they're only a couple of blocks away. So those are two that I would think of. I'm sure that anybody here can think of one or two. So that's my suggestion on how to get started on subcommittees.
Okay, thank you, Alice. And what we can do tonight too is people can offer ideas. And certainly next week, I think we are going to see, I hope at least, we're going to see some really refinement of ideas, and maybe that will help us refine our subcommittee processes. Just being conscious of time and thinking of this working session that we have, that could be a good suggestion too. Jennifer?
Yeah, I wanted to build on that a little bit. And I guess in my mind, I had some ideas around just what subcommittees might exist. And one of them, I think, dovetails with Alice's suggestion, but was more broad in terms of just ideas for near-term activation. And what does that look like? What are the cost considerations? What are the security considerations? What are just the logistical considerations? If a food truck comes, do they need power and how do they access it? That sort of thing, I think would be a really good subcommittee, not being prescriptive around food trucks just in general, but what does activation of the site near term looks like? And then what are our fundraising opportunities? Should we, if we want public buy-in and city council buy-in, should we be looking at grant opportunities? What does that look like? Are there actual funds available to supplement public funding for this type of project? Really, and not applying for it again, not, trying to activate any of these ideas or move forward with them, but just to put them on the table in a concise and sort of well-informed and researched space. I think that would be hugely helpful. And then I think the other big piece of it is just the consensus subcommittee, which is not a good name either, but something around, getting engagement from the Black partners and, especially private sector businesses that are part of that space. What does a business that butts up to that space think about it? Is there a potential loss of revenue around losing that parking? Do they see it as a benefit? What sorts of things would be great for that? But I guess I considered subcommittees to be more sort of big buckets of research, very, very defined and targeted research around, different areas of a plan that we might submit to city council for a recommendation. And I agree wholeheartedly that I believe our working session will put a finer point on just some of the possibilities versus just, hurdles that might be too large to cross for us, but would really give some solid parameters and construct to what those activities of the subcommittees might be. So.
Wonderful. Those are definitely good ideas as well. Are there other ideas folks would like to have? We're certainly seeing some overlap here. That's great. Wow, this could be a quick agenda item then. So just to make sure we're capturing all of the ideas that have been presented, maybe, and then we can, I would really encourage us to bring this back up after, at the end of our working session next week, and we can maybe hopefully refine those topics then. Ellen, you just put your hand up.
Yeah, one of the things I'm very interested in is what is the culture of the commons and the code of conduct. That was specifically directed that we should be working on. I gathered some ideas to that in my statement on short-term vision, whatever, element 5.2. I think that is a part of the community engagement, which is maybe the overall topic here, how to get people all through the community to know what's happening and to feel themselves part of it. But what is the culture? What is the code of conduct? How are people encouraged to act to one another? So this is a wholesome, welcoming, safe, exciting, interesting place. And I would encourage people to look at least those ideas that I laid out in my effort toward short-term vision. It's item 5, which is about community engagement and management. That what is the code of conduct and the culture, and how we elaborate that and get people to respond and improve, so that it's actually a culture that represents the community as a whole.
All right. Thank you, Alan. I think we've got Alice and Frank.
Frank?
I didn't hear you over Alan's call.
Oh, Alice, you want to go first and then Frank?
Okay. I think some of well, I kind of would like to go, since it sounds like some of the things about subcommittees sound like those things might be part of this facilitated discussion. I'd like to kind of toggle over to the July 7th near-term activation discussion. Oh boy, that's a mouthful. What questions do you have for guest speakers? Well, I don't know who the guest speakers are, but I would like to have someone describe the process of designation as a park or expansion of a park. That idea, because we already have this element that is a park, we may want to be looking at how these can be integrated. I know there's very divergent ideas about that, but I think we need to understand the actual parameters. What does it take to get designated, or what does it take to expand? What does it take to add area to a park? That might be a good narrow place to look at somebody who can represent the parks planning. But that's just one. I think there are others that would merit specific address from someone who knows, including, for instance, the breakout panels in the foundation that are shown on some versions of the plans for the parking structure. What's the intent there? I think it was several that some of the block partners, for instance, would have interest in underground parking that they could have access to. So that says to me we need to have either whoever the engineer is for the DDA, but if we're not going to have the DDA involved, that seems kind of dumb. If we're going to be talking about things with about working with businesses and owners on the lot. So I think those are the kinds of questions we need to ask, very specific, but which open up to a greater understanding of the complexity of this.
So real quick, because I know Heather is going to want to talk about this, and as our primary facilitator, I think, on this, and Camilla as well. Before we get into this, real quick, I did want to just offer up to Frank and Erica on a subcommittee discussion specifically. We've had a number of things that have been thrown out by members. We'll capture those, obviously, and create a list so that they are thought about and referenced during our meeting next week as well, and we can refine. Are there other things on the subcommittee line item before we turn it over to Heather to talk more about next week?
I guess, I think it's a subcommittee, but I just wanted to echo what Alan said. I think an underlying issue that underpins our chances of long-term success is the culture of this space, including Liberty Plaza. We all know the history of Liberty Plaza and how it's not viewed as a welcoming place by the entire community. And we need to really look carefully into this. We need to talk to community groups. We have to talk to the people who populate Liberty Plaza. And we really have to put that issue front and center in a way that is inclusive, is understanding, and is viewed as a positive cooperative effort to improve that perception in the community and in the actual activity of the space.
Very good point. We've got a couple more folks, Erica and then Sarah.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate what Frank says in terms of just thinking about what has been successful in the area, and how how do we and what are challenges in the area in terms of building more public spaces. I think that's important. I would caution, and for myself, I would not be supportive of a subcommittee that focuses in too abstractly on culture or quite specifically the commoning movement. It's not that I don't think that that's interesting, and I'm glad that there are folks in the community thinking about that. I think that's best left in the nonprofit space. But for the work of this group advising council, I think we have, I'd like to, from my perspective, I'd like to keep it very tangible in how we use the space and activate it and move forward in terms of the physical design and pieces like that, that I think we certainly do have. In terms of public spaces, we have certain expectations in our culture, and we have certain rules around parks and things like that. And so I think to Alice's point of, would this be expanded into a park space? That's an important conversation, and how that would happen. But I'll just leave it at that.
All right, that was good, Erica. Thank you, Sarah, and then Rita.
I'll just plus one some things that I think Erica just said and that Jennifer just said, and maybe add a little spin on what Erica just said, just as like a maybe. So I agree with Jennifer. I think there should be a block partner subcommittee and a fundraising subcommittee for sure. So I just wanted to like plus one those. And I think the physical activation, I think we will get more understanding after our session next week about what that looks like. But I think the digging into some of like the challenges would be another good subcommittee. I agree that with Erica, that I don't think we should have a culture subcommittee. Although I think that the equitable engagement piece is interesting, and I don't know if that would warrant a subcommittee, but I think it definitely warrants attention. Like I think that we should be out there talking to people that use Liberty Plaza if that wasn't done previously, and just really make sure, or at least present recommendations for processes that the city could undertake to really make sure that we're understanding like the best use of this space. One of the concerns that I have, I think, I'm sorry if you can hear my children screaming, is around the commoning movement. I feel that that's really tied to this space, and I think that could be polarizing for the community writ large. Like I'm sure it's great. I don't fully understand it. I'm not sure I support it as something that like we embody as this group. And sometimes I feel like that's being pushed a little too much on us. So I would not be in favor of a subcommittee that focuses specifically on that.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Rita, and then Alan.
Thanks. I think the point that I would want to make in terms of the culture is that I do agree very much with the equity issue, that we do want this to be, for me anyway, welcoming for everyone. And I mean everyone, all layers of our groups of people who come into our city and who currently live here, that it should be totally welcoming. And I think for me, it would be a failure if this becomes a gentrifying issue that results in essentially driving people away who currently use the space. I would be horrified if that's the result of what we do. So that is something that I don't know how to express it. I don't know how to include it in what we do, but I feel it is extremely important.
I agree.
Rita, I echo those sentiments too. That's always been on my mind of, we don't want to further encourage a narrowing of anything. So
if I could just say one other thing, Frank and I had an opportunity to talk with someone last week who was there who actually really likes the place. And I think we need to understand that there are people who really like it and feel included right now. And so that feeling is something that I did get a sense of on another event that I went to there, that I would like everyone to have, and that I think will contribute to our success.
Absolutely. Alan?
Yeah, I echo Rita's last comment on the people who are there. I think they are really the base for developing an improvement association for the Liberty Plaza. And that if they were seen more as resources and respected participants in the creation of the place they use, rather than as problems, we would all be far ahead. And the people I have talked to there have that same feeling, that the community perception of them is of them, and that is not proper. We should not reinforce that. But I raised my hand on the question of the commons. From the beginning of this, this has been a community commons. We cannot presume, unless we want to advise the city council, to drop the fifth word, the defining word of the Central Park and Civic Center Commons. It is an effort to relate to the global movement of municipal self-management. And while it is true that the commons is not a common phrase and understanding in our education, that is a problem of our education. And we all are participants in our self-education as to what the commons is actually about. Not to polarize us, but to see there's great opportunity and creativity in this idea that is going all over the world. So I hope we see that as something to learn about. And I think I've mentioned before that in the structure of our country, the notion is to privatize the commons. And that is not the picture of this endeavor and what was actually voted on and argued for. And people may have various views of it, but I think our responsibility and somehow is to see, well, what is the content of this idea and how is it beneficial in the development of our community? So I'm hoping that we see the commons as our opportunity and our focal idea, which connects what kind of Central Park we have, what kind of civic center building and focal point that we are creating.
Thank you, Alan. So, Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly elaborate on what Alan said. I think, people get overly concerned about this. Essentially, what a commons is a user management of public resources, right? So there are certain procedures and ideas about how people sort of in a community organize to use public resources, and how and that process is managed by the users themselves. And there are many possible iterations of that. This whole idea was actually investigated in depth by a Nobel Prize winning woman called Elinor Ostrom, who wrote her PhD thesis and several books on managing the commons, which is shared public resources. And so educating people a little bit about what she had to say about that, how that could be done effectively to make sure that the use of public resources is very inclusive and diverse and fair and equitable. She outlined very clearly, and she has a center at the University of Indiana. She's dead now, unfortunately. She laid that out, and there's been some elaboration of it, but that's basically what we're talking about. I'll drop it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. So I think we've got a lot of great ideas out there on the table for subcommittees. We can certainly refine them as we get through next week's work session. Heather, why don't you talk a little bit about, and Camilla, what your vision is for next week, so that folks can react and know what to think.
Sure, I'll get us started. So we have this divided into 3 parts, and the first third of it is really that learning piece of everybody understanding what systems already exist and where there might be opportunities to enhance those systems or do something different. So what I lined up is a representative from our park system, and then Maura Thompson from the DDA will be coming as well. I just received an email from the person from Parks, the director from Parks, that he's not able to make it. He had an important family thing that came up. So I'm going to talk with him tomorrow and figure out if there's a replacement or if there's something else that we can do to get that information. because I don't want anything to get lost in translation through me. I think it's important to hear from people that really are deeply working in the park system and have managed Liberty Plaza, all this time, and then their perspectives on how the library lot may or may not fit into the park system. So I'll keep you posted on that. But that's what was originally established for that first piece. And then also about renting the space too. I know Alan's been through the process of renting the space in the past, but I think it's a process that a lot of people just aren't aware of. So there may be somebody there that will walk us through that too, just so that you're aware of how that process works and how people can apply to use the space, because it is actually available for anybody and everybody to use right now. They just have to go through a permitting process to do that. And then, so with that, Camilla and I worked at putting a list together of some top activation things that came, near-term activation approaches that rose to the surface from the work of the Center of the City Task Force, as well as the vision statements that you provided to me before. And so we wanted to walk through that and prioritize, see what was really people are really feeling like what they want to bring forward. And then the third part is getting into how would that happen? What can we do, again, with the systems that already work to make things happen if we don't feel like we have the systems in place or the support in place that we need to make things happen to activate the space in the near term, then what can we do? What can we recommend to City Council to move forward? But my hope is with this is to kind of get at some of that impatience, Rita, that you brought up before. And that's why I wanted to solely focus on the near-term activation, because I think if we can start getting more activity out there and at least feeling, that this is a public space, transitioning it over from a parking space to having people on that and having that activity, then I feel like it's we're gonna feel like we have momentum, and it'll be a resource for the community to enjoy. So with that, Camilla, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
No, I'll just reiterate that the hope is by the end of the July 7th meeting, we'll have a pretty good draft of a physical report that we can give to City Council members, explaining recommendations and then outlining how to go about completing those recommendations. Yeah, I'm very excited.
Wonderful. Alan's got his hand up here. I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for putting in some extra time to make that happen. And Camilla, thank you as well. You're a member of the council here too. And so we appreciate you stepping up in that regard too. Alan?
Yeah, this is very good. I am eager that as much of this is available to all of us beforehand. Even if Colin Smith cannot come, we should have a report from the parks on the actual usage of Liberty Plaza. I did get a report at one point from the initiating committee, who used it for what time, at what times, the church, the Sonic lunch, and so forth, and what issues they have on the security from the police as to what the security questions they have there. First Martin, if they want to give some report because they are involved in the oversight of that we should have that report beforehand. And similarly, if there is a list of activating elements to begin part 2 of this, I hope that can be circulated ahead of time so everyone can have an opportunity to reflect on it before the meeting. That's basically that we should be well prepared for this facilitation and not trying to catch up with what we just hear for the first time.
Well, I'll ask about any reports that exist on Liberty Plaza. Again, I'm talking to Colin tomorrow, so I'll ask him about that, if he can send those along. In the meantime, if you have any specific questions for him or anybody else in the park system or the DDA, then that would be helpful to me and to them to prepare for the conversation on the 7th. So just send those directly to me.
All right, Frank?
Regarding the DDA, I'm very happy that Maura will be there. I would, and I don't know whether I spent some time on their website today, but I would like to know something about the origins of the DDA, its charter, its mission, and there didn't seem to be a statement describing that. I know what the DDA has done, and it's done a lot of wonderful things, but I keep hoping and thinking that what we're about should be embraced by the DDA. We can build a lot of housing, we can get a lot of business activity into downtown, but we need welcoming public space. I think we're all aware that over 1,000 new bedrooms are going to be constructed literally within a sand wedge shot in golf. I don't golf anymore, but we're talking about the DTE, the former Y lot, the Paleo lot. All these places, we're going to have a lot more people living in proximity to the center of the city. And I would like to see over time, and maybe more as the person, for the DDA begin to embrace this as part of their mission to provide this kind of active, welcoming public space.
DDAs are established through enabling legislation by the state. So if you haven't already run across that, I can pass that along to you. That can give you some insight into why DDAs in general exist. And then essentially their mission is to do public investment just for economic development. And that can be done in many, many different ways.
Right. And I've, Sarah was very enlightening to Rita and I on a conversation that businesses benefit from public space. There's an economic benefit if there's welcoming, positive, well-managed public spaces. Businesses in proximity draw real value from that. So, anyhow, thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Erica.
Thanks. This perhaps could have come up, I could have brought this up in the rules section too, but it's also kind of a question. I know that there's at least been it'd be helpful to know from Parks perspective and Parks Commission perspective, how they want us to be thinking about and discussing Liberty Square. I mean, this is a space that we're thinking about and we're talking about and we're thinking about intersecting with, but we actually don't have purview over exactly. And so I'm not quite sure how. I think we need to come to terms of what that looks like moving forward as well. And if there's tension around that, how we need to figure out how to address that.
That's a great point. Sarah?
To add on to that, because that was what I wrote down too, just really understanding better from Parks, like what would be the process for them to fund any ideas that this group came up with or any recommendations that this group came up with regarding Liberty Plaza. What is their prioritization process for capital projects, and where does this park exist on their list, if it does at all?
Alice.
I'm trying to remember what I was going to say, but it had to do with the DDA. But it also, here's the deal. We have city institutions like the DDA and like the AADL who are very prominent in the way things happen. And I think there's been an adversarial role, adversarial condition going on for years. And now, and that comes back to the fact that we had a public ballot to establish this center of the city kind of place. The DDA has often narrowed their role and is seen a lot as the parking authority. And that's not really fair to them, but it also is a solid public perception that all they do is parking. they also are going to be doing renovation of Fifth Street and Division, Fifth and Division. And those are going to be very important projects that should be mutually beneficial for all concerned. Same with the AADL. The AADL has had somewhat negative impressions of what all this means, the development of the library lot, and has never been supported. But it seems to me it could be a very mutually beneficial relationship if we were to look to transform it. Recently, New York Times had a profile of this guy, Bergarian, I think his name was, who died. But he was basically a turnaround manager for the New York City Public Library. They had a terrible problem with Bryant Park, and they were losing money, and they didn't have room for this, and there were all these problems. And he had a vision that all of those things would be good things if people could get a grasp on it. It just struck me right then and there that he described the New York Public Library as I believe AADL is. It's important to our culture. It's important to the education of young people, and all of these things. It's very critical for a city our size, or almost any size, to have a library that's active and supported in the community. What we do on the library lot, as we used to call it, is very important to the library, but the library is very important to all of us. So these two institutions, like the DDA and the AADL, need to become really strong partners with us, and we need to figure out how to make that happen. What will, for them, what they will make that happen, and what that will do to benefit successful development of the library.
Thank you, Alice. Jeff?
Thank you, Alice. Right on.
Yeah, I just want to support what Alice is saying, but also kind of extend it a little bit to the library specifically, because there's the same issue with the library here that perhaps we're dealing with when it comes to AADL and the DRDA. The library, for whatever reason, appears to me to, or at least the people who run the library appear to be somewhat resistant to this public space, and perhaps feel that some of their plans were changed as a result of its existence. And yet the library is a critical partner and could be such a wonderful partner if there was more, interchange and interaction between us and, between everybody involved in this space and the library. But so far as I can determine, there's been virtually no communication from the library on this about their future plans, or how they see this, or how they might interact with us. And so I would welcome the library maybe coming and talking to us about, how they feel about this, and what they have in mind for themselves, and how these things could intersect. Because in most cities around the world, the library is at the heart of the commons, the urban commons, and urban development. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Alan?
Following the same thought, the library is the center of the commons all over the world. And Josie Parker took great offense at some people who supported the commons did not support the bond issue the library put forward in 2012 or whenever it was. And she holds the commons responsible for that. The library board has not permitted a discussion on the commons. The notion of the block group was to bring the library into a discussion on how to develop the whole block. I wish we would see organizing the block group as an important means of drawing the library into a block-wide discussion, particularly seeing the potential of a civic center building, which would be an extension of many functions of the library. So we should be partners and there's been an unwillingness to communicate that I hope either the block group or personal contacts could bridge. But the library is critical in the long run to the sense of what is the commons and how information is shared and the great facilities and programs that they do. We should be right next to each other. And it was interesting that when on their north wall, they were putting up murals, and Odile went up and said, "How wonderful, you're putting up murals for the commons." They said, "Oh no, this is not for the commons, this is for the library." That the actual on the ground workers there have the view that the commons and that the library commons and the commons were two different things, and estranged. It's very sad, and we need to make a bridge of that. And I think that having as among our short-term goals the activation of the block committee, the block group, to bring all the partners on the block together in some way is very important.
I do want to be conscious, because I think there's a couple of important points that have been made here by both Jeff and Alan around, do we do, for the discussion next week or for future discussion, depending upon the agenda for next week, certainly engagement with the block partners and the library are very important. And I think there's a universal sharing of that support. I do want to be a little conscious of, so I've not been part of these discussions as long as some of you, but I do want to be conscious that we now do have an advisory committee to council. We will probably have better engagement, I hope, than with the both block partners and the library. Let's try and keep the context positive and constructive in that regard, if that's possible. Sarah and then Erica.
Thanks. I've forgotten a little bit about what we're supposed to be discussing right now, but I think this library piece is really important, and I'm sure that we couldn't get a representative to come, next week. That's very short term, but I think if there is somebody or somebody's that we could engage with, or a subcommittee could engage with, I think it's a huge opportunity for them that maybe they're just not seeing because of some of the history. I think, especially as they start to open stuff up, like it's the perfect space to be hosting outdoor events. Like my future vision for this, like that library lane is like closed off to traffic, and it's just all sort of one big like pedestrian oriented plaza. And I think it would be really, and I think there could be short-term recommendations in there too. So yeah, I think it would be really important for us sooner rather than later to engage, maybe with them first and then the rest of the block partners, just depending on timing. But that I think that's a great suggestion. I think that the library needs to be pretty high up on our list, but I do forget what exactly we're supposed to be like throwing out.
We're just giving Heather and Camilla feedback on what they presented, and also ensuring that if there are external, I think the question that Heather had on the agenda, external groups that we want to have as part of this, and at least give her some lead time on that. Erica.
Thanks. I see that we're running over agenda time, but I did want to comment on and caution us not to bring, we bring our perspectives from our history to this table. That's just what we do as humans, right? But I hear people bringing perceptions about the Ann Arbor Library, and particularly actually naming the director in not a particularly favorable light around this commission table, and at the same time suggesting that we might want to have positive relations with them moving forward. And I don't think that these kind of conversations are particularly productive to building a positive relationship with a key block partner. And so I would caution us to not do that in the future. I think the library has been is an incredible organization, doing so much for our community and drawing so many people downtown. And they have been a place for gathering for many years. And so I thank them for all the work that they're doing. I think that I have spoken with Josie Parker and about this kind of as just and just a few things to share that I think are okay. I think she's, I think the library is interested in engaging and providing feedback at appropriate times in this process. I think that likely that, like many block partners, they're going to be more productive to have them respond to different different pieces that we bring forward and different recommendations and get their reactions to it. I don't know that they're necessarily going to come and engage directly to this group is maybe the most productive use of their time right now. But we obviously we want to make sure that we're thinking and getting their feedback on some of the recommendations that we put forward. So as we, I would urge us that after the recommendations that might come forward next week out of this working session, that we take the time to form them, and then before they go to council, that we could then send them out to these key block partners for some feedback, and that's a good way to engage them. But they're not going to, I don't see them engaging in a huge commission discussion with us. I'm not sure that's a productive use of their time.
Thanks, Erica. Frank.
Yes, I just want to echo everything that Erica said, and she said it very well. I try to live by, my mantra is be positive and pleasantly persistent. Let's stay on a very positive. We all want the same thing at the end of the day here, and that is a well-functioning, welcoming space that every partner, every individual can enjoy and benefit from. The other thing I wanted to say when I put my hand up was that I hope we're open to. We have 2 hours on July 7th, and it just seems like it's jam-packed. Let us be open to, multiple sessions, working sessions to get where we need to go if that proves to be the case. I hope we can achieve what a number of you have said at the end of the day on the 7th, but this is we're going to go into intermediate and longer term, but we may need more time for the short term piece to really be fully fleshed out. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And I do think it's going to be important that, we, obviously with any facilitated meeting, having our facilitators really guide us along is going to help us. And I think we should help them be successful at getting us to that end. That's our goal here. I think we all have mutual urging of development of some stuff, some concrete stuff here. So, okay. Well, this was, I think, a great discussion. I hope Heather and Camilla, we provided some useful feedback, and I hope that folks are feeling good about next week. I'm looking forward to it. Are we ready to move on? The next agenda item would be, we bounced around a little bit, but would be the next agenda. I'm almost wondering if maybe, I know we've talked about building out agendas this meeting. Maybe we want to think about that, next week as we're building out this working session. It seems a little premature to get into it tonight. So maybe we can allow the working session to occur and help utilize that to inform our next agenda. Does that sound like an appropriate action? Okay, sounds good. In that case, the next agenda item is public comment. Heather, do we have any members of the public?
Yes, Robert would like to talk.
All right, Mr. Black, you're up.
Thank you again. Bravo to you guys. Kudos to your good work together. I'm sitting here in awe of your ability to speak and listen respectfully with each other. And you have done a lot to what we call in facilitation work to recognize your commonalities and resolve your differences. And that's great. I think just to reiterate, I think you should keep your agenda clear and straightforward for July 7th. Simple, take a small step together and win. Get as much as you can in writing ahead of time, as Alice's comments about the same thing from your working groups underneath this, advising the group to give you things in writing ahead of time. That will help you prepare. And then make sure that you use your time wisely to get the learning part done well so that you have time for Q&A. And then concerning the task force part, the priorities, as Alan suggested, get as much of that on paper to the group ahead of time so your mental process of working this and being prepared will be much more effective as a mastermind group together. If you do look on page 8 of the task force, you'll find 6 recommendations. That gold mine of work that was done by the task force, well, it's like the booster rocket that was jettisoned in space flight. The initiating committee is actually still with you, carrying the lunar module for you, so don't lose them. You need that to get back home. But these meetings, when I heard Alice and Jennifer speak about the interim activation, I was referring to number 3 in the recommendations of the task force. And if you look at the page behind them on pages 10 through 14, you'll find a very clear action plan and set of steps that you can follow to build on that foundation. When I heard, let's see, it was Jennifer again, and then Sarah talking about the block partner subcommittees as critical work, you can start informally. That should happen. It's recommendation number 2 from the task force. And so I ask you and urge you to just get into that. And then lastly, recommendation number 1 from that task force is where Alan was going. It says the responsible party in this case is the city council to define the culture of the commons. So one of your recommendations to them is to say, please do that. And if you look down your action steps on your task, action step number 1A, educate yourself about the commons. And action step number 1C, develop a code of conduct for the space. So you have some clear foundational pieces that you can build on, both from the task force and the initiating committee, that will serve you well. And I'm happy that you have done a great deal to repair your foundation so you don't turn out like Champlain Towers in Florida, that you're going to move forward from this and build a good, strong process from here forward. Last thing I'll say is please set up a series of work sessions with specific themes to them that lead you to your objectives. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Black, for joining us this evening. Heather, I don't think there's anybody else, is there?
I don't see anybody who has their hands raised. I see that there is somebody on the phone. So if you did want to speak, you can press *9 to raise your hand. Okay, I think that's it.
All right. Well, I think I would just like to point out that we are improving in our overage. We are less over now, slightly, and so that's positive. So I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Can we get a motion for adjournment? And so moved, seconded. Got a few seconds. Hope you have all a wonderful holiday. Look forward to seeing everyone next week on the 7th. It's going to be a great discussion.